Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we are looking at Explorer. This is a 5-cost action card from Seaside, and it says, you may reveal a province from your hand. If you do, gain a gold to your hand. If you don't, gain a silver to your hand. So clearly this is a treasure gainer. It just gains you the basic silver and gold treasure cards. It will gain you one at a time, and this is important, the card goes directly to your hand. Now, you get the choice of whether you want to gain the gold instead of a silver, only if you also have a province in your hand at the time that you play it. Gaining a gold is usually much better than gaining a silver in most cases. So ideally, you'd get the gold over the silver, but, sometimes it's fine to pick up a card that's just gaining you silvers instead. If you take a look back at the base game videos on Bureaucrat and Bandit, those videos talk more about gaining silvers and gaining golds. There's a bunch of cards out there that are basic treasure gainers. And so we've covered this sort of ground before. So this video is going to focus a bit more on the specifics of Explorer and what makes it different from other sorts of treasure gainers. So let's start on a positive note. Let's talk about the good parts of Explorer. If you're going to gain a treasure through an action card, gaining it directly to your hand is the best place to gain it to. This is a little faster than other standard ways of gaining cards when it goes to your hand, because you get to play the treasure one shuffle sooner than you would. And if you want to play the treasure on the same turn, you don't need to have more draw available in your turn to draw the treasure out of your discard pile if you want to play it, right? So after you've drawn your deck, you don't need an extra cantrip and an action to actually draw the card. Sometimes you really want to do that, not only because it gives you more money this turn, but you might have something like a remodel and you want to actually trash the card on that turn and turn it into something else. Ideally like a province, and it's a gold. So the problem with Explorer is that there's sort of an inherent contradiction in the way that it works. So if you want to get a gold, you need to have pretty good draw so that you can actually draw it alongside a province. The problem is that if you are already drawing your deck, how many treasures do you actually want to add to your deck? Because the problem with gaining lots of treasures is that they're all stop cards, and that means that they stop you from being able to draw your deck if you gain too many of them. And so would you have been better off just buying a gold or two directly rather than going for an Explorer if your deck's already in that state? If you've already bought a province, how much value are you going to get from gaining more golds as well? It might be the case that by the time you're at the stage where you can actually draw a province to your hand and use the gold gaining from Explorer, the game's nearly over because, there's only going to be 3 provinces per player left or something, right? It's not very long. How much more game is still available at that point? So you might say to yourself, well, okay, what if I got an early province? So this is not unheard of. There's a card that I've shown here, Tournament. This is a card that really wants you to gain an early province. But the thing with Tournament is that your reward isn't a gold. Your reward is a special action card called a prize. There's multiple ones to choose from, but there's only one copy of each. They tend to be powerful, 3 of the prizes are really strong, and there's only one, and it's to the first person who gets there, so there's a real incentive to actually get a province first. In terms of Explorer, upgrading a silver to a gold is good, but would you base an entire deck strategy off of that? I don't think you would. Right, I'm not really known a time when gunning for early province is really the sort of thing you want to do with Explorer. You at the very least want to try and get your deck drawn first, and sometimes you will. If you want to do something like remodel the golds into provinces, then you really want the golds instead. So at that point, you would go for a province, but it wouldn't be your entire game plan. You'd get your deck set up first, and then you gain a province so that you can start double provincing with that remodel you've got. Right. I use remodel with these gold gainer things because they really do supercharge gold gaining, because they basically turn the gold directly into province. So that's the sort of time when gold gainers are really, really good. So Explorer it does this gaining to your hand thing, and that's nice, but there's other similar cards out there that tend to offer other better benefits. So if you want Explorer just to gain treasures and also, be able to play them that turn and earn money, then here's an example of a card, Haggler. It also costs 5. It's a terminal stock card. It gives you money when you play it because it actually generates you 2 coins. And then when you buy cards, you get to pick up other cheaper cards for free. So Haggler, if you buy a province, it'll gain you a gold, right? But you'll gain that gold before you actually ever have a province in your deck. And it won't just gain you 1 card. You could potentially, if you have multiple buys, you get multiple cards. And of course, it's not just treasures, right? Haggler can gain you other cards as well. It can gain you more villages. It can gain you draw cards. There's lots of options. Explorer only gives you treasures, which is very limited, right? Cards that solely gain you treasures have limited use case because you don't normally want lots of treasures in your deck. So say you want to use Explorer because you want a bunch of silvers, right? Well, here's an example of a card, Sculptor. It also costs 5, right? It's a terminal stock card, and it gains cards directly to your hand. Gains cards costing up to 4, so it can get you a silver as well. And if you do get a silver with it, you also get a villager token, which will give you +1 action. So sure, Sculptor can't get you golds, but it's strictly better at getting you silvers, right? And you still go to hand and you get to play them. But it can also gain you other cards other than silver as well, right? So again, there's just that improved extra options available to you, which makes it much, much stronger. But instead of looking at cards that gain things other than treasures, what about Courtier, the card we've done a video on already? It only gains you gold, right, in terms of direct gaining. But it gets better as well if you draw it alongside another card. But instead of province, it's just another card that has multiple types, and that's way easier to set up your deck to start drawing that than it is to start combining it with province instead. And of course with Courtier, if you do that, you could pick, for example, +3 coins and gain a gold, and now you've got the same benefit as you got from Explorer, right? 3 more money this turn and you added a gold to your deck. But if you have a little bit more draw, you can actually draw that gold into your hand, and now you've got 6 money, right? And that's just substantially better than something like Explorer would give you for what is a very similar card. So you can just see how Explorer doesn't really cut it compared to other similar cards. So that's enough about why Explorer is bad. When is Explorer actually good? So there are reasons that you want golds other than playing them for money, as I explained. Fuel for cost-relevant trashing like Remodel and Salvager and Apprentice and the like. This is nice in that once you play it to gain that treasure, you don't need to finish drawing the rest of your deck until you get to use the treasure. So if for whatever reason, you partially dud your turn, you couldn't draw all the way through, you might still be able to remodel a gold into a province this turn, because the gold goes straight to your hand, right? You don't have to fully draw everything. And that's nice because that can be a little more consistent in getting off a double province turn right at the end of the game. When your deck is flooding with all these cards, victory cards, and starting to not draw all the way anymore. So that can be really nice. Similarly, we talk about decks like Slogs, which is where you would take an alternate card strategy like Duchy Duke is the classic example. Right, you're not actually looking to build a deck drawing engine, you're just going to buy a load of victory cards and churn through your deck really slowly. They kind of like treasure gainers, because getting in a load of treasures is going to improve your density of non-victory cards, right? Because you're throwing in so many victory cards, you don't want eventually your deck to just turn into only drawing victory cards and not being able to do anything. So just having a way to gain a bunch of treasures can be nice to bloat your deck up a bit. But the problem that a bunch of other treasure gainers have is that because the treasure goes into your discard, and because it takes a long time to reach the shuffle, it might be that you only get to play that card that you gained one more time over the next 6 turns or whatever. But with Explorer, you do get to play that treasure straight away, and then, you're just getting that extra play out of it. which is nice when deck cycling's really slow. So that's where the two-hand benefit really works out for Explorer. But the reality is that Explorer is just a weak card. Right, it costs 5. This is a really competitive price point. There's a lot of very powerful cards at 5. Right, I just showed you an example of 3 cards that cost 5 that are better than Explorer for a range of reasons. There's just a load of better cards out there. And sometimes you're building your deck out of cards that cost 5, and then eventually you're like, well, okay, I've got enough of those. Maybe there's time now to get Explorer, but it's sort of too late because the game's nearly over, and at that point, you're just better off buying your treasures directly, I suppose. The creator of the game, Donald X. Vaccarino, he once infamously said about Explorer, they can't all be the best 5 cost ever, which that sort of ringing endorsement should probably give you some idea of how weak everyone considers Explorer, including the designer himself at this point. This is close to the bottom 10% of all Kingdom cards. Right, it's just a fairly weak card. And to be fair, cards that only gain you treasures, like Bureaucrat, even Bureaucrat does more than just that, but they're not very good. Because cards that gain other things as well usually also give you the option to gain these basic treasures. Like Workshop, it can also gain you silvers, but it's also got way more flexibility. So just treasure gainers are a bit lame. Explorer came from a time in Dominion where the thought that gaining golds was stronger than it actually is, which is why you have to go out of your way to gain a gold. And now these days you look at cards like Leprechaun that get you a gold, but they only cost 3, right? Just to give you some idea of how low the value of gaining golds directly actually ended up being. Right, so it's an old card and it's just not that great, unfortunately. So that's Explorer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head over to the online client and we're going to generate some boards with Explorer on it, and we're going to see what value it has in those kingdoms. So I spotted Navigator while this was loading and it was like, oh no, right, this is going to be a weak kingdom probably. Maybe not. So we have Sentry for trashing as well as Lookout, and we've also got Remodel. Well, that's nice because Remodel and Gold Gainer is pretty good. There's a big problem with this deck, though, and that is, where is the draw? There is no draw at all. And we have Festival and Mining Village as villages, but there is no draw. So what do we do here? The lack of draw is a big problem. It means that Explorer is probably only going to be getting us silvers. Remodel Explorer isn't going to work out because we need to draw 3 cards together. Remodel Explorer and Province into the same hand, and there's no draw. Unless we use Seller, even then that might be difficult, but the thing is that instead of going to all that effort, you could just go for a more regular strategy. So this board is so exceptionally weak that this could actually be a time for Navigator to shine, which is a bit wild. What would you do? You would get maybe Sentry's just straight up better than Navigator though, right? But what else are we actually doing with our terminal? There's 3 terminals on this board. There's Remodel, there's Explorer, and there's Navigator. I think I would actually go for Explorer and gain some sentries. I would thin down. I would actually gain treasures with Explorer, and then soon they will eventually start getting me golds. It's not very good, but this is an exceptionally weak board. So yeah, I think I prefer Explorer as my terminal instead of Navigator, just because Sentry is sort of covering Navigator's goal. Sorry, Navigator, you almost had a kingdom where you were actually worthwhile, but it didn't happen, did it? So I'm going to open Poacher and Silver, and I'm going to look to get a Sentry or 2, and then I'm actually going to pick up an Explorer, and I'm just going to flood myself with treasures, and I'm going to gun for 1 province a turn. And that's what I'm going to do, I think. And I will eventually start getting some golds with Explorer, but I'm just going to try and flood by getting a deck thin and then playing an Explorer most turns. So that's sort of the aim here. So Explorer actually good here, but only because every other card, there's no engine and everything else is really, really poor on this kingdom. So we should be safe with Poacher because no piles actually any risk of running out here at all. Poacher, I will actually grab a couple of Poachers, but you can't make like a Cantrik Kingdom out of poachers. Like, that's not going to happen. So, yeah, so we actually used Explorer there. I wasn't sure if Explorer was actually going to be valuable in any kingdom, but we got one. And it was weak. So weak cards do well in weak kingdoms. Here we have our only trashing is island, but there's also technically native village if we can get away with it. Now, it is our only village, so we might not be able to. We have minion and library as draw. There is bandit as a gold gainer, so that's directly competing with explorer. But what do we actually want to do? Like, is ironworks even good? What's it going to be gaining? Secret passages, native villages, islands, embargoes. It doesn't sound very good. But the minion stack's no good either, because there's like no trashing and there's nothing to do with it. So what even happens here? This seems like a very weak kingdom again. You see, I could ironworks some islands just for some extra points and get rid of the estates. That actually might be okay, and then I could maybe ironworks silvers. Like, is that what I'm doing? Am I opening ironworks silver and I'm just gaining some islands just because they're like some points and there's nothing else to really do? And then I buy silvers and eventually, like, I go for province. This could be, eventually it turns into like library big money, which is not the worst thing ever, right? It's going to act like a smithy, and if I can start gaining like silvers with ironworks and then eventually shift into library, that's probably okay. I don't know if I would ever stop for bandit or explorer. Like, I'm not sure how good that would be. I would rather be playing library as my terminal. Now, admittedly, ironworks is terminal when you gain something like silver with it, but you know, you can always gain a secret passage if you if you collide it with like a library, you could gain a secret passage, and then you're not at risk at drawing secret passages dead with library. So I think this is a library big money thing, but weirdly I'm actually going to be using ironworks to gain silvers instead of picking up a gold gainer, and that's just because I want it to like gain me a bunch of islands initially to just clean up my deck a little bit and get those extra points that might help. So that's very weird. But yeah, so we've got like 2 gold gainers and we've got 2 workshop variants, and there's like nothing else going on, so very odd kingdom here. So I think Explorer misses the mark. If I would prefer to go for Bandit if I'm going to get a gold gainer anyway, so I think this is just outclassed by a better gold gainer, honestly. So, because I'd actually value the attack here. It's not going to be great, but it will actually trash some of your opponent's treasures. So maybe Bandit is actually better. I don't know, maybe you just relegate ironworks to picking up secret passages and you actually use bandit once you like run out of islands and you've played a bunch of them. That might actually be better, but yeah, I think I ignore explorer here. So that's kingdom where it just got outclassed. Kingdom number 3. So we have steward to trash as well as upgrade, so we can get thin pretty quick. I noticed that there's lighthouse and there's like 2 attacks, discard attacks. Is it good to avoid getting hit with militia here? I think so. So is there draw? There is with steward, and technically shantytown sometimes, but probably not. You have got mining village as a regular village, and of course there is minion as well. Can we do anything? Yeah, so here's what we can do. We can get thin with steward, and we can have a minion and vassal deck. There is no plus buy, I notice. There's also upgrade to like try and get thin, but eventually we can vassal and minion, and I think we're not actually that worried about militia in that case because we're just constantly minioning, so who cares about militia, right? Maybe giving our opponent a random 4-card hand is going to be better than, I think it's a waste of time, militia. We want some mining villages, we want some vassals, we're going to get thin with steward, we start getting minions, and then eventually we just shift to 1 province per turn with a minion and vassal stuff. And that's it. We don't actually want any treasures at all in this kingdom. We want to be super thin so that vassal doesn't miss as often. And that's kind of it, really. I think that's all we do. Because these are cheap, we can start getting them. If we get a 2, maybe we pick up a lighthouse anyway. When we get a 2 early on, we're not trashing with steward. It might allow us to hit 3 while trashing on a turn. Like, we only use it to carry money over to our next turn, to make a turn where we trash with steward a little better, so we can pick up like vassal instead, and we get our engine going with that. So we ignore explorer here because we absolutely do not want treasures at all. That is going to be some treasureless kingdom. We never buy any treasures there. Kingdom number 4. So I see chapel straight away for trashing, very powerful. I see torturer, but I don't see a village. There is no village here. So what do we do with a lack of village? What's our plan? Get a load of... Okay. So we can have a silver, and we've got merchant, and we've also got market. So we can get a Cantrik Kingdom going, and we do get really thin, really fast with chapel. So we can open silver, chapel, and we can just start buying merchants, and then we start buying markets, and then we start buying multiple merchants with the extra buys. Is Outpost worthwhile? There is no actual draw. It is just a Cantrik Kingdom. Having said that, you know, you might actually be able to get it to work. It is at risk of dudding, but I think there is a good enough chance that Outpost is actually fine. And I think we only want to get up to single province turns. We would ideally like more than 1 silver, I think, just to... so that merchants less likely to dud when you start adding provinces, because we're going to have a bunch of them if we can. But we're just gaining some cantrips until we can hit 8, really. That's sort of our plan. And we're going to have some redundancy in our deck, so we're going to get a little bit more than we need. And we're actually going to play an outpost every turn. Not every turn, sorry, every other turn. I don't think any other terminal is worth it. So we're just not playing a terminal on our outpost turn, and that is because the other terminals are just going to get in the way from drawing our deck, and we want as few stop cards as possible, right? We're going to have a chapel, an outpost, a silver. I would rather have no other stop cards. Man, that makes outpost pretty bad, but it gives us an opportunity to buy more merchants, right? So I'm going to get at least 1 market in my first 5, but then I might get an outpost. And then, honestly, I only really want like merchants and markets and provinces, and ideally that would be the thing. Maybe another silver at some point. I think that's what we do. I think we go for a Cantrik Kingdom that's just really, really thin. Lighthouse is not worth it. The only attack is Torturer, and no one's really playing Torturer. If the opponent does try and torture us, well, we go down to a 3-card hand, but we're going to do that anyway with our outpost turn, so we really want to be set up to do that. And Torturer seems bad. Like, Torturer big money is not very good on this kingdom, right? So, like, compared to Market Merchant, I think it just loses to that, because like Outpost means that they just gain a whole load of cards very, very fast. So Explorer's no good. We just don't want the stock cards here. So no Explorer. Here comes the final kingdom. There is Moneylender to trash and also Lookout. That's fine. We can get thin with that. There is Sea Hag. Lookout kind of counters that-ish. You don't really consider it a counter, but there you go. Ghost Ship can also sometimes be fine with Lookout as well. Like, we top deck the cards we don't want, and then we get to trash them, so that's nice if our opponent does that. Oh, and there's Diplomat as well to draw up. That seems good. Okay, so we're going to open Lookout and Moneylender for sure on a 3-4. On a 5-2, I guess we're just sad, and we open... Do we still just open Moneylender and nothing? Like, oh, that's nasty. But yeah, I think that's what we do. We are eventually going to hit Artisan, and we want to be gaining Festivals and Ghost Ships, and probably some Diplomats. Just a couple of them, though. And we're going to get a draw engine going. It's not a very good draw engine, but we should be able to get thin. And eventually we might be able to look out the Moneylender. I think it's fine to Ghost Ship our opponent, even if it helps like Diplomat and Lookout, maybe. Is it? Well, we have to, because the alternative is that we draw with Festival and Diplomat. So you might as well just pick up the Ghost Ship. It's like the only other draw, and we can get it for cheap with Artisan, so we just pick it up. Sometimes it'll work, other times I guess we don't really care if it benefits Diplomat. Actually, hang on, having said that, Festival Ghost Ship is not real draw. You can't actually increase your hand size with that, but you can just keep playing them in perpetuity, right? You can just keep going with these cards. I'm saying like Lookout counter Sea Hag, but it sort of doesn't when you consider the fact that you have to actually have the Lookout in your starting hand for it to work. So I think Sea Hag actually might be okay here, thinking about it. Like, it's really hard to get our hand size up. So I kind of like it, actually, I think. But maybe not straight away. I think I open Moneylender Lookout. And as my deck starts to get under control, then I will start to play Sea Hag. But we've got real problems with hand size. That's what I mean to say here. There is an alternative gold gainer with Courtier. And given that we have Ghost Ship and also Diplomat and Sea Hag as like multi-types, if we wanted a gold gainer, I would definitely take Courtier over something like Explorer. And what's interesting is that Courtier can drop our hand size, which, you know, helps with like Diplomat, I guess. You can just take it for money and buy, but actually you've got Festival, which is way better than that. So like Festival's just going to be better than Courtier. So I think that's what I do. With Artisan, I can afford to just get a load of these. I try and get really thin. And it's almost sort of like doing a Cantrik Kingdom with Festival Ghost Ship, but it's a bit unreliable. But the constant onslaught of Ghost Ship will lock out any other strategy except doing that, I think. And so would like frequently Sea Hagging your opponent. Like, your opponent couldn't do Ghost Ship big money here. They would get absolutely smashed because of these two attack cards. So, yeah, so that's what we do. We do not want Explorer because we don't want the stop cards from the treasures. And again, this is a kingdom where I would happily just get all of my money from festivals and possibly Courtier if we run out of festivals, or even a Baron, right? Like, there are ways to gain money, and I don't want any treasures at all. So, no, Explorer's really bad here. Anyway, that was Explorer. As you can see, we happened to luck into a kingdom where it was good, but honestly, it was pretty bad on all those kingdoms. Like, gaining just treasures is not great a lot of the time. And funnily enough, when Remodel did show up, we actually couldn't use it because there was no draw, which was kind of a shame. I think that was the kingdom where we actually used it, yeah, but we couldn't even use it for its gold gaining like combo. So, anyway, yeah, so that was Explorer. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.